in Judges 6:24, it actually says there, the Lord is peace. The Lord is well-being. I absolutely love that. And Dave Smith, in his book, God's Plan for Your Wellbeing, says, it's not just that God shows us how to find well-being. He himself is our well-being. I absolutely love that. And so why a well-being day? Like, why have we come together today to have a day about well-being? Well, because stuff happens to us all. Stuff happens to us all. And I'm going to say I love the verse where Jesus says this, but I love it and I hate it. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. Thanks, Jesus. That's good news. But take heart, I have overcome the world. So stuff happens to all of us in our lives, difficult stuff, challenging stuff. And if we're really going to get down to it, if we haven't experienced that yet, we will. In life, we experience a lot of challenges. And none of us are immune to the difficulties that happen in life. There's probably nobody in this room that if we were all brave enough to say that we would all have experienced challenging times in our lives. And we know from our own experience, so myself and the team, and from science, that when we encounter difficult times, it can impact our body and it can impact our mind. And if we're unsure how to think about or how to feel about what's happened to us in our lives, we can develop problems with our mental health and with our physical health. And particularly if we experience prolonged stress, so a situation in our lives that goes on and on and on. Maybe one of your children's unwell. Maybe you've had physical health problems. Maybe you've been made unemployed, and it goes on and on and on. That has a massive impact on us if we're unsure how to deal with that. So this day today is for you if you're currently in a place where you're thinking, I'm not sure how to deal with what's happening in my life at the moment. And you may be going through a hard time. But then today is also for you if you feel like, I'm actually doing quite well at the moment, thank you very much. This is stuff you're going to take on board, pack into the suitcase of your life, and then one day, when something maybe isn't going so well, you're going to feel more equipped with how to deal with that. And I often think we have our car service regularly, maybe, we have our car service so it doesn't break down. And often our cars are flashing lights at us like put some fuel in or pump the tyres up or have a service. And what do? Often we ignore it and we say, I'll get round to that. But then our car might break down and it's a lot more costly to mend a car that's broken down than to put a bit of oil in. And it's the same with our well-being. If we just keep ignoring the signs, we will decline and feel worse. But if we've got tools and skills to help us to continually look after our physical and mental health, we will flourish. Now that's good news, isn't it? That is good news. So we're going to start now to talk about some key facts about well-being, just so that we can really start to understand what well-being is and how it applies to us today. And the first thing that I want to share with you is that whatever your starting point today, improvement is possible. Whatever your starting point, improvement is possible. And there's a slide that's going to come up now, an orange slide. And this for me is a very hope-filled diagram. And you might be thinking that looks a little bit complicated, Julie. So I'm going to explain it to you and why this is actually hope-filled. So what we have on the screen is what we call a dual axis. So from the bottom to the top, we've got the well-being line. So at the bottom, poor well-being, and at the top, flourishing well-being. And then side to side, on one side, we've got somebody who's got a diagnosed mental health problem. And on the other side, somebody who has no diagnosable mental health. Now, what we know, whenever I say we, I'm kind of talking about the world of psychology, is that it is possible for somebody who has a diagnosed mental health problem to have good well-being. So you might be somebody who's sitting on the right-hand side of this axis who's had a diagnosis of depression or anxiety or bipolar or schizophrenia. You might have a diagnosis, but if you learn how to look after your well-being, it is possible for you to be flourishing. But there's also another part to this diagram. It is possible you may have no diagnosis of a mental health problem, but you're like, body, do I have a body? Do I have a mind? Do I look after myself? No. So you might have poorer well-being than somebody who has a diagnosis who's looking after themselves. Do you see why I see that as being good news? So whatever your starting point today, this day is for you, and it's possible for you to improve. The second thing that I want to share with you is that change involves us taking small, gradual steps and practicing. So change doesn't happen in a big swing. And often we do that on 1st of January every year. We swing and say, I'm going to eat better this year. I'm going to lose, 3 stone, or I'm going to run every day. It's like swings. It's all or it's nothing. But we're not talking about that kind of change here. We're talking about small steps, one step at a time, to start to make changes. And my pastor, Pastor Glenn Barrett, he uses a phrase which sounds so simple, but has helped me profoundly. He says, just take the next step. That's it. That's all that we're going to encourage you to do from today, is just take the next step. So, moving on, I want to share now that our physical and mental well-being is not fixed. It's really normal for our well-being to ebb and to flow. So, it's not fixed in one point. So what we're going to do now is our first writing down exercise. So make sure you've got a piece of paper and a pen in front of you. So what I want you to do on this piece of paper, and I'm not going to ask you to share this with anyone else on the table unless you want to, so this can be private to you. I want you to draw a scale from 0 to 10. Okay, so a 0, a horizontal line, and a 10 the other end. And this first scale is your physical well-being, okay? Now, I want you to imagine that at a 10, the 10 represents tip-top shape. You're like, I'm rocking it, I'm fit, I'm healthy, my body feels strong, I can jump out of bed in the morning or at least get up and feel tip-top, okay? 0 is, oh, I've got a body. Oh, I didn't even realize that I had to do anything with this. Okay, that's the extreme. Now, I want you to mark on that scale where you feel you are now. So, assess your own physical well-being. Where would you put yourself on that scale today? Okay, no one's looking at anyone else's. Where would you put yourself? Just mark on that scale where you are today. Now, what I want you to do then is to have a think, has there been a time in my life where it's been higher or lower? So has there been a time you felt more healthy, more strong, or less healthy? And for me, when we were in lockdown, the start of lockdown, I started getting into doing some of these home workouts, and I was doing like lifting weights. I was rocking it every morning, did that for 6 months, and I felt like tip top shape. And then in one moment, I slipped a disc. And my well-being started to plummet week by week down that scale because I couldn't move my body, and that affected my body and my mind. So have a think for yourself. Where has your physical health moved up and down, and why? It's always important to ask the W questions. Who, what, why, where, when. What I want you to do now, and these are all things you might take away and work on a bit more, is draw another scale. So exactly the same, another 0 to 10. And on this scale, it's about your mental well-being, your emotional health. So again, at 10, this represents you saying, I feel like I'm not just coping and managing, but I'm thriving in my mental health. I feel like I've got resilience. I feel like I can manage with challenges that happen. I feel like I'm doing really well. And then 0 is the opposite of that, as far away from thriving emotionally that you've ever been. And again, mark on that scale where you are today. On average in the last week, where would you put yourself? Okay, where would you put yourself on that scale? And then again, has there been a time it's been higher or lower? Notice, is there a time where you feel like you felt better or worse? And why? What was happening at that time of your life? Was it a particularly challenging time or a particularly good time? Notice how you've moved around the scale. And if we had more time, or if it was just you and me or a few of us sat together, we'd start to plot different times in our lives where we've moved up and down on that scale. And often it is due to circumstances. It's due to stuff that happens in our lives. I can see nods around the room. Stuff happens and it affects us mentally and physically. And when stuff does happen, think about my slipped disc. It took nearly 2 years for me to get back to lifting weights again because it had to heal. And it's just the same with our emotional health. If stuff happens, we have a loss or something difficult happens to us, it's going to take us time to get our heads and our hearts around it and to start to move up that scale again. So I hope that's been helpful and probably really thought-provoking to notice how we are moving around on that scale. But the good news is we can improve step by step, little by little. So the next thing I want to share is that many things are out of our control, but our well-being is something we can take control of little by little. Now, we all learn in 2020 that we don't have as much control over life as we thought we had, didn't we? We all learned that suddenly plans were cancelled. We couldn't see our loved ones. We couldn't go out to work. Our children didn't go to school. We couldn't have our grandchildren over like we used to be able to do. And we felt out of control. And when we feel out of control, it can lead to us feeling anxious or panicky or trying to control other things in our lives. Like maybe we're feeling out of control in our life, so we try to take control of our eating. Or we think, if I could lose some weight, I'll feel better about the rest of my life. So we try and grab other things. Maybe it's our home. We try to over-clean. We're like cleaning, but because we're feeling anxious about paying the bills, we try and take control of something else. And I once heard a pastor say, God is in control of the universe. All I have to do is control myself. That I find the life God has for me when I stop trying to control the universe and start to control myself. Did you get that? I'm going to say it again. I think we might have the slide. I'm not sure. God is in control of the universe. All I have to do, or maybe we don't, is control myself. I find the life God has for me when I stop trying to control the universe and start to control myself. And one of the most difficult things, I think, to come to terms with in life is that some of the difficult things that happen in our lives are completely out of our control. And what I want you to do now is I want you to draw a big square on your piece of paper. Okay, just draw a square. It could even be a circle, doesn't really matter, or a triangle if you're creative. Draw a shape. And what I want you to do is take a moment to write inside that square the things that are going on for you in your life at the moment, which you feel are your biggest challenges, okay? And just just do a headline. You don't have to do the small print. So it might be, if it was me, it would be a name of one of my children, just their name. I'd write that down. Okay. Or it might be finances, or it might be, paying the bills. It might be your grandchild. It might be your job. Okay. So you don't have to go into detail, but jot down, what are the things that you're worrying about the most? The things that are on your mind, okay, in a headline. Now, a few years ago, there was a book written by a man called Stephen Covey, and he introduced in that book a concept which he called the circles of influence and control. And I found this really, really helps as we begin to consider how we respond to the circumstances in our shape that we've just written down. He suggested that there are things that happen in our lives that may be worrying us and stressing us out, which are completely out of our control, okay? There's things we can't do anything about, like the weather or the football scores or our children's behaviour or another person's attitude or behaviour. We've got no control. Other things, he said, may be within our sphere of influence. We may have some influence over these things. And then there's other things that are completely within our control. So you'll see on the screen there, you've got these 3 circles: within my control, within my sphere of influence, and out of my control. And sometimes we believe that some of the things in our box are within our control. So, for example, if you've got young adult children, you might remember the days you could tie them into their high chair, or you could put them in a buggy and they couldn't go anywhere. But all of a sudden they become young adults and you're like, oh goodness, I'm trying to control them. I'm trying to keep them in. I'm tracking them on my iPhone. I'm trying to keep track of them. But actually what I began to realize as my kids became young adults is actually if I try to control them, I'm actually going to lose control. I'm actually going to affect the relationship I have with them because they'll feel like I don't trust them. So I came to realize actually they're not in my control anymore. But if I keep a good relationship with them, they're actually still in my sphere of influence. If I do their head in, they'll move out and be completely out of my control. So I want you for a moment to have a look at your list and ask yourself, where would I fit those things into those circles? Okay, look at your list. Okay, your finances, your relationships, your situations. Where would you put them in that diagram? And I actually, as the more and more I've talked about this diagram, I actually am going to relabel that outer circle from out of my control to miracle territory. Okay, because when something is completely out of our control or influence, it's in God's hands. And that is miracle territory. So we're saying, actually, God, I can't do anything about those things. I'm going to say they're in miracle territory, where I'm believing, God, that you are going to move in that area. So I hope this is helpful as you begin to think, okay, this is my stuff that I've walked in here with today. These are my worries, my fears, my concerns, my challenges. You know, it might be your own emotional or physical health is on your list. And I want to suggest that our emotional and physical health is one of the only things that's actually within our control. Our attitudes, our behaviours, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions are within our control, but they're often the things that feel the least out of our control. But actually, with the help and support we're going to give today, we are hoping that you're going to feel more able to take control of what is yours to manage and give to God the things that are too difficult for you to handle.